Hi, I'm Ivy. Tonight's archive asks a simple question. Was the Skinwalker legend ever real? Let's find out together.
What if every terrifying story you have heard so far was created by the human mind? No monsters, no portals, no shapeshifters, just fear. That is precisely what many scientists believe. But if they are right, how do they explain everything that still refuses to fit? Welcome to the archives. I am Ivy, and tonight we walk the razor's edge between rational psychology and the unexplained, where certainty becomes a fragile thing. Consider the baseline of human perception. For decades, researchers examining high strangeness reports have run against a wall of biological reality. The human brain is an extraordinary, highly efficient engine of interpretation. In isolated, high-stress environments, like the high plateau of Utah, the sensory architecture begins to strain. The mind craves patterns, seeks threats, and fills in the blanks when sensory input is ambiguous. When a family moves onto a remote ranch surrounded by folklore, whispered legends, and decades of local lore, they do not arrive as blank slates. They arrive carrying anticipation. This is expectation bias at its most potent. When you expect to see something terrifying in the shadows, every swaying juniper tree becomes a silhouette. Every snap of dry sagebrush under a nocturnal wind becomes a footstep. Psychologists point to mass suggestion and group panic as foundational drivers of anomalous narratives. If one member of a household experiences a spike of adrenaline and perceives an unusual movement, their vocalized alarm triggers an immediate neurochemical cascade in others. Fear is intensely contagious. Soon, multiple people are corroborating a shared hallucination, cementing a subjective event into objective reality within their memory banks. Add to this the compounding toll of environmental factors: chronic sleep deprivation in unfamiliar surroundings, low-frequency infrasound generated by local topography, and subtle exposure to carbon monoxide or environmental toxins can induce auditory hallucinations, a sense of a malevolent presence, and profound disorientation. Many sincere witnesses who describe harrowing encounters are not lying. They are reporting what their brains genuinely registered under extreme physiological duress. Yet as we examine these mechanisms, a quiet unease begins to settle. If every sighting of a red-eyed predator, every floating orb of light, and every disembodied voice can be attributed to sleep deprivation, psychological projection, and the architecture of fear, why do these explanations occasionally stumble? Why do the hardest skeptics find themselves standing silent before data that defies neat categorization? We must ask ourselves, does explaining the mechanism of an experience completely erase the reality of what caused it? Or are we simply using clinical language to dress up things we refuse to understand? But as we peel back the layers of human psychology, we encounter a deeper layer, one where fear stops being merely a reaction to the environment and begins actively constructing the monsters we see in the dark.
When fear becomes chronic, it changes the architecture of memory. Psychologists studying urban legends and mass panic have long observed that once a community or an isolated group begins reporting a specific phenomenon, the threshold for others to perceive that exact same phenomenon drops dramatically. If a rancher reports a strange beast on a ridge, visitors arriving weeks later will look at that exact same ridge and see the outline of the beast. False memories graft themselves onto actual events, smoothing out inconsistencies until the narrative feels airtight. Think of abandoned homesteads, ancient burial grounds, and isolated valleys. They acquire reputations not because they are inherently cursed, but because human psychology is naturally drawn to assign malicious intent to the unknown. The brain evolved to treat ambiguous stimuli as apex predators until proven otherwise. In the dark, a shadow is never just a shadow. It is a threat. Yet even when we acknowledge the staggering power of the human mind to fabricate, distort, and amplify terror, we hit a hard structural wall. There remain anomalies that simple psychology struggles to absorb. How do we account for physical instrumentation, magnetometers, thermal cameras, and night vision arrays, registering simultaneous disruptions alongside human observation? When multiple experienced investigators, trained to spot hoaxes, bias, and optical illusions, witness identical, measurable deviations in their equipment at the precise moment of an anomalous event, the psychological explanation begins to fray at the edges. Skeptics argue that coincidence and confirmation bias account for the rest, but intellectual honesty requires us to admit when a model cannot hold the entire weight of the evidence. A rigorous investigator does not rush to embrace the supernatural when a mundane answer is available. Neither do they dismiss the inexplicable simply because it makes them uncomfortable. True investigation demands that we live in the tension of uncertainty. Perhaps fear creates monsters. Perhaps legends shape what we believe, or perhaps some mysteries survive precisely because they refuse to fit inside either explanation. You started this episode looking for a definitive answer, a verdict on whether the Skinwalker phenomenon is real or a psychological fiction. But as the archives close for tonight, ask yourself, are you any closer to the truth, or have you simply learned how deep the shadows go? One final archive remains unopened, the oldest, the most controversial, and according to those who guard these lands, the one that should never have been released. Until next time, keep your eyes in the dark.